The desert stretched for miles in every direction, silent and unforgiving under the weight of the night sky. The only sounds were the distant howls of coyotes and the soft rumble of tires rolling over uneven dirt. The blacked-out SUVs moved slowly, their headlights dark, engines purring low like hunting predators. They weren't rushing. They knew exactly where their prey was going. 30 minutes earlier, Agent Jack Lawson sat in the passenger seat of the lead border patrol truck, eyes scanning the horizon through his night vision binoculars. The desert was a black ocean, stretching endlessly beneath the stars, but Jack could read its movements like a seasoned tracker. He had spent his entire life in hostile landscapes, from the rocky terrain of Afghanistan to the dense jungles of South America. The desert was just another war zone. The only difference? This war didn't end when the sun came up. "Movement near the ridge," he said, lowering the binoculars. His voice was low, controlled. His radio crackled as another agent responded. "Yeah, we see them," said Agent Morales from the second truck. 5 miles out, moving slow. Could be coyotes, could be cartel scouts." Jack exhaled, his fingers drumming lightly against his vest, feeling the weight of the gear strapped to him. "It's not animals. They're testing us." "Jesus," Morales muttered. "You think they know we're here?" Jack nodded. "They always know." The convoy was 6 agents, 2 armored trucks, lightly armed but alert. Standard border security patrol, simple recon, no heavy combat gear, no backup close enough to matter. Jack didn't like it. The cartel wasn't just running drugs anymore. They were moving weapons, people, stolen military equipment. And lately, they had been getting bolder. "Cut the lights," Jack said. "If they're watching, let's make them blink first." The trucks slipped into darkness, only the soft hum of their engines betraying their presence. They kept rolling, tires kicking up dust, radio chatter going dead silent. Jack felt it in his gut. Something was wrong. The moment he saw the burning truck blocking the road ahead, his suspicions became reality. "Ambush!" he barked, grabbing the radio. "We've got—" The first gunshot cracked through the night, shattering the windshield. Then the world erupted in fire. Hell breaks loose. The first explosion came from the left ridge, a plume of fire ripping through the night, sending dirt and rock raining down onto the road. The cartel had them trapped. The armored truck in the rear flipped, its tires lifting off the ground as the shockwave rolled it like a tin can. The sound of metal twisting, glass shattering, men screaming, all of it drowned out by the relentless gunfire that followed. Jack had already moved, throwing open the passenger door and rolling onto the dirt as bullets slammed into the side of the truck, tearing through the cabin where he had been sitting seconds ago. "Contact! Contact!" Morales' voice shouted over the radio, but the transmission was already breaking up, jammed. Jack hit the ground hard, dust coating his tongue as he scrambled for cover. His military instincts kicked in, shoving aside any hesitation. This wasn't a border patrol skirmish. This was a coordinated kill zone. The cartel wanted them dead. He pressed himself against the side of the truck, peeking over the hood. Shadows moved fast in the distance, men fanning out, keeping low, trained. These weren't just smugglers. These were sicarios. Cartel enforcers, former soldiers, hired killers. They had superior numbers, better positioning, and the element of surprise. But they had one problem. They didn't realize who they had just walked into a fight with. Jack's rifle was already up before the first cartel enforcer had cleared his cover. He squeezed the trigger. The first shot hit center mass, dropping the man instantly. The second shot caught another in the throat, the body crumpling against the dirt. He pivoted, using the smoke from the burning truck to move unseen, working fast, precise, lethal. His team was scattered, pinned down, firing blindly. They weren't trained for this kind of fight. They were law enforcement, not combat veterans. But Jack had spent years behind enemy lines, surviving against worse odds. And he wasn't about to die in the goddamn desert. He spotted Morales trapped behind a wrecked door, returning fire but outgunned. 2 cartel gunmen closed in on him, rifles raised. Jack didn't hesitate. He broke from cover, sprinting forward through the hail of gunfire, dropping to a knee as he fired. The first bullet hit one enforcer in the head, the second ripped through the other's spine, sending him down. Morales gasped, looking at Jack like he'd just seen a ghost. Jack grabbed his vest, hauling him up. We have to move, now. Jesus Christ, Lawson, Morales panted. I know what this is, Jack snapped, shoving an extra magazine into Morales' hand. Stay low, stay close, and follow my lead. The gunfire didn't stop. The cartel was relentless, forcing them back into the canyon, cutting off their escape. Jack's mind worked fast. They needed a way out, a high point, somewhere to counterattack from. He spotted it. A rocky incline, 30 yards away, leading up to an old abandoned watchtower. If they could hold that position, they might have a shot. Jack tapped Morales' shoulder. We're going for the tower. Morales looked at the open ground between them and safety, then back at Jack. You're insane. Jack smirked. Welcome to the war. The run for survival. Jack fired his last smoke grenade, filling the canyon with a thick white cloud. Go! He shouted, and they ran. Bullets tore through the air around them, kicking up dirt and rock, but they kept moving, adrenaline surging. Jack hit the base of the tower first, spinning to cover Morales as he climbed. He laid down suppressing fire, picking off 2 more cartel soldiers as Morales scrambled up the rocks. Then Jack followed. Gunfire slammed into the stone behind him, but he didn't stop, reaching the top just as Morales pulled him up. The high ground was theirs. Jack dropped to one knee, breathing hard. He checked his ammo. 2 mags left, no grenades, no comms. Below them, the cartel regrouped, surrounding the tower, voices shouting orders in Spanish. Jack's jaw tightened. They weren't just attacking anymore. They were waiting. Something bigger was coming. Morales reloaded, sweat dripping down his face. They're regrouping. We're screwed. Jack scanned the horizon. The ridge behind them led back toward the highway. If they could just hold long enough, they might have a shot at escaping. But the cartel wasn't going to let them go that easily. Jack exhaled, steadying his breathing. They want to fight. He chambered around, eyes cold, focused, ready. Then let's give them one. The night air was thick with smoke, the scent of burned rubber and scorched metal hanging heavy as Jack pressed his back against the rocky ledge of the old watchtower. Below, the cartel soldiers moved like wolves, their voices sharp, weapons raised, scanning the darkness for any sign of movement. They had them pinned, trapped with no clean way out. Jack wiped the sweat from his brow, his mind working faster than his pulse. Morales was breathing hard beside him, reloading his rifle with shaky hands. He wasn't built for this. He was a border agent, not a soldier, but none of that mattered now. They were here. They were alive, and they had to fight their way out. Jack reached for the last of his magazines, feeling the weight of it in his palm. Not enough bullets, not for a prolonged fight, not with the numbers they were facing. But numbers didn't mean shit when you were fighting a man who had spent years hunting insurgents in Afghanistan. A war zone was a war zone, no matter what country you were in. Below them, the cartel leader barked orders, his voice thick with impatience. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in tactical gear, not some street-level thug. This wasn't a random attack. This was an execution mission, planned and executed with military precision. They knew who Jack was, and they knew what he was capable of. Jack exhaled, gripping his rifle tighter. If they thought he was just another border agent, they were about to learn the hard way that they had stepped into a fight they couldn't win. The first move came fast. A pair of cartel enforcers broke from cover, sprinting toward the tower's entrance, rifles raised. Jack moved on instinct, popping up from cover and squeezing the trigger. The first round hit center mass, the impact throwing the gunman backward. The second shot punched through the other's shoulder, dropping him into the dirt. Morales let out a curse, ducking as a hail of bullets tore through the air, ripping into the wooden beams above them. The structure groaned under the assault, dust and debris raining down around them. They're trying to take out the supports, Morales said, panic creeping into his voice. Jack didn't hesitate. Then we don't give them time to finish. He grabbed a fragmentation grenade off one of the fallen agents, pulling the pin with his teeth. With a quick flick of his wrist, he lobbed it over the ledge. The explosion ripped through the night, sending a shockwave of dust and flame into the air. Screams followed, bodies hitting the dirt, men scrambling for cover. The chaos bought them a few precious seconds. Jack seized the moment. We move now. They scrambled down the side of the tower, boots slipping against loose rock, bullets whizzing past them. Jack hit the ground first, rolling into a crouch, rifle raised. He saw the flanking team too late. 3 cartel enforcers were already moving in from the east, cutting them off. One of them raised a shotgun, the barrel gleaming under the moonlight. Jack acted without thinking, lunging forward and grabbing the barrel, twisting it away as the shot went off. The blast tore through the dirt beside them, but Jack was already in motion. He drove his elbow into the gunman's throat, feeling the cartilage collapse. The man gurgled, dropping his weapon, and Jack finished him with a knife to the gut, twisting the blade deep before yanking it free. The second enforcer tried to raise his rifle, but Morales, finally finding his nerve, fired first, the shot catching him in the chest. The third man hesitated, stepping back. His mistake. Jack grabbed the shotgun from the ground, spun, and fired point blank. The enforcer's body hit the ground in a heap, more shouting, more movement. The cartel was regrouping. Jack grabbed Morales by the vest. "We need to get to that ridge. If we can make it there, we can lose them in the rocks." They ran. The desert was vast, the ground uneven, but Jack had spent his whole life navigating terrain like this. He knew exactly where to step, how to move. He could hear the engines of cartel trucks roaring to life, headlights cutting through the night as they pursued. Morales stumbled. Jack grabbed his arm, yanking him up. "Move, damn it!" A spotlight lit up the ground ahead of them, and then came the rapid staccato of gunfire. The cartel wasn't playing around anymore. They were laying down suppressive fire, forcing them into a kill zone. Jack could see it, a box canyon ahead, a dead end if they didn't change course. He skidded to a stop, yanking Morales down behind a rock. "We're not gonna make it. They're pushing us into a choke point." Morales swallowed hard, looking around. What do we do? Jack's mind worked fast. The cartel had numbers, but numbers didn't mean shit if you knew how to fight like a ghost. He glanced at the road leading toward the canyon. It was narrow, carved into the side of a rocky embankment. One good hit could send a truck sliding into the ravine below. He turned to Morales. "You trust me?" Morales exhaled. "I don't think I have a choice." Jack smirked. "Good answer." He reached into his pack, pulling out a small block of C4, one of the last things he had grabbed from the wreckage. He secured it against a large boulder, wiring it fast. Morales' eyes widened. "Where the hell did you get that?" Jack didn't answer. He checked his watch. 10 seconds. The cartel trucks roared closer, headlights flashing. Jack grabbed Morales, yanking him back into cover. He clicked the detonator. The explosion was deafening, a blast of fire and dust that ripped through the embankment. The lead cartel truck didn't have time to stop. The driver screamed as the front tires went over the edge, the entire vehicle tipping forward before plunging into the ravine below. The second truck veered sideways, slamming into the wreckage, flipping onto its side in a screech of metal. Jack didn't wait to see the aftermath. He pulled Morales to his feet. "Go, now!" They ran again, this time with the element of surprise back on their side. Jack didn't stop moving, didn't stop thinking. The cartel was bleeding now, and they would be pissed. But this was his kind of fight. He would make sure none of them walked away from it. The battle wasn't over. It was just getting started. The dust settled around the wreckage, the smell of burning oil thick in the night air. The lead cartel truck had plunged into the ravine below, its engine still groaning from the impact, metal twisting and scraping against rock. The second truck lay on its side, its front end caved in from the force of the explosion. But the fight wasn't over. Jack could hear the surviving cartel soldiers staggering out, barking orders, weapons clattering as they regrouped. They weren't retreating. They were pissed. Jack grabbed Morales by the vest, pulling him behind a jagged outcrop of rock as another burst of gunfire tore through the dirt where they had been standing seconds ago. The cartel wasn't just firing blindly now. They were aiming, hunting. "We don't have time for this," Morales panted, trying to reload with shaking hands. Jack's eyes flicked toward the ridge ahead. If they could reach the top, they'd have a clear view of the valley below. They could turn this around. But the cartel had numbers, and soon they'd realize the blast wasn't enough to kill him. They'd spread out, flank them, and this whole thing would be over. He pulled Morales in close. "Listen to me. We make for that ridge fast. When I say go, you run. Do not stop. Do not turn around. Got it?" Morales swallowed hard, nodding. He looked like a man who had already accepted his death. Jack didn't give him time to dwell on it. He moved first, stepping into the open and laying down suppressing fire, his rifle barking in short, controlled bursts. The first cartel soldier who poked his head out took a shot to the throat, collapsing instantly. Another tried to flank left. Jack put him down with a double tap to the chest. "Move now!" Jack barked. Morales took off, boots kicking up dust as he scrambled toward the ridge. Jack followed, keeping low, moving fast, every step measured. The remaining cartel gunmen adjusted their fire, rounds snapping past his head, ricocheting off the rocks. Then came the roar of another engine. Jack turned just in time to see a third truck, one that had been trailing the convoy, barreling down the dirt road toward them. The mounted gun on the back swiveled, the shooter already zeroing in. "Shit," Jack muttered under his breath. The gun opened up, a wall of bullets shredding the ground behind them. Jack lunged, tackling Morales just before a round would have taken his head clean off. They hit the dirt hard, rolling into the crevice of an old, dried-out riverbed. The gunfire ripped apart the rocks above them, sending sharp fragments raining down. Morales coughed, spitting out dirt. "This is bad." Jack ignored him. His mind was already calculating, working through their only options. They needed to get rid of that truck before it boxed them in. The cartel still had at least 5 men on foot, but they were holding back now, letting the heavy fire do the work. Jack had seen this tactic before: press and flush. Keep the enemy pinned, close the gap, finish them off. He reached for his vest, fingers closing around the last grenade strapped to his gear. Morales saw it, and his eyes widened. "Number. That's insane." Jack's lips twitched into something like a smirk. "You got a better idea?" Morales groaned. "I really hate you." The gunfire momentarily stopped, the truck repositioning. The cartel was moving in, getting closer. This was their window. Jack popped up from cover, launching the grenade in a perfect arc. The metal canister tumbled through the open passenger window of the truck, landing in the cab just as the driver realized what was happening. Jack and Morales were already running when the explosion hit. The truck erupted into a fireball, the force of it throwing cartel soldiers backward, engulfing 2 men completely in the blast radius. The mounted gun ripped free, spinning wildly before crashing down onto the dirt. The blast kicked up a thick cloud of dust, cutting off visibility for a few crucial seconds. Jack didn't stop. He grabbed Morales by the arm, yanking him up the last stretch of the ridge, their boots digging into the dirt as they pulled themselves over the top. The moment they reached the crest, Jack turned, rifle already up, scanning the chaos below. 2 cartel soldiers were still alive, stumbling through the smoke, disoriented. Jack took them both down before they even knew where the shots came from. Silence fell over the canyon. For the first time since the ambush started, there were no more voices. Jack's breathing was steady, his rifle still raised, scanning. His hands were sore, his knuckles raw from gripping the weapon so tight. His mind was already pushing forward. Where were the reinforcements? Was this really over? Morales collapsed onto his back beside him, sucking in air. "Jesus Christ, man, do you ever die?" Jack smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. "Not today." Morales let out something that was half a laugh, half a pained groan. "I need a drink." Jack checked his ammo count. "You can have one when we get out of here." Morales turned his head, staring at him. "I'm serious. When we get back, I'm buying you a beer." Jack nodded, scanning the desert one last time. The cartel forces were gone, the wreckage of their vehicles still burning below. There was no movement, for now. "We need to move," Jack said, standing. "There's no way they don't have more guys coming." Morales groaned as he pushed himself up. "Lead the way, Rambo." Jack smirked but said nothing. He was already thinking ahead, already moving. They weren't out of this yet. The cartel had lost this battle, but the war, that was just getting started. Jack could still feel the tremors in the ground as the last cartel truck burned in the canyon below, sending thick black smoke into the night sky. The distant crackling of flames was the only sound left. The gunfire had stopped. The shouting had faded. But something in his gut told him this wasn't over. He didn't trust silence. Silence was a trap. Morales wiped blood from his forehead, his breath still ragged. "Tell me this is the part where we ride off into the sunset." Jack didn't answer right away. His eyes scanned the ridge, the desert beyond. Something was wrong. The cartel had been too well prepared, too coordinated. This wasn't some random skirmish. This had been an execution mission. Jack exhaled, gripping his rifle tighter. Number? They're not done yet. Morales let out a sharp, humorless laugh. Of course they're not, because why the hell would this be easy? Jack moved first, boots crunching over loose dirt as he led the way down the ridge. Morales followed, limping slightly, but he didn't complain. They both knew staying put was suicide. The cartel would be sending reinforcements. If they weren't already on the way, they would be soon. Jack's mind worked fast. They needed a way out. They needed to disappear. A few miles south, just past the ridgeline, was an abandoned smuggler's route, a back road the cartel had used for years before Border Patrol started locking it down. Jack had run ops in the area before. If they could get there, they might have a chance to make it back to civilization without running into more cartel soldiers. Jack turned to Morales. We move fast, stay low, no lights, no sound. If we get caught out in the open, we're dead. Morales swallowed. Comforting. Jack started walking. I aimed to please. The desert stretched wide around them, the moon casting long shadows over the cracked earth. The smell of gunpowder still clung to Jack's gear, mixing with the sharp bite of sweat and blood. Every few steps he scanned the horizon, checking for movement, for headlights, for any sign that the cartel wasn't finished hunting them yet. They moved in silence for nearly an hour, the adrenaline wearing off, exhaustion creeping in. Jack could feel it, the fatigue settling into his bones, but he forced himself to push through it. He had marched through worse. He had survived worse. Then he heard it, the distant growl of engines. Jack froze, his hand snapping up in a silent signal for Morales to stop. Morales didn't ask questions. He just obeyed, crouching low behind a cluster of boulders. Jack followed, pressing himself against the rock, eyes narrowed as he peered into the distance. Headlights, 3 vehicles, moving slow, sweeping the terrain. Cartel search team. Jack exhaled through his nose. They weren't going back empty-handed. Morales shifted beside him. You have a plan? Jack's mind was already running through scenarios. They couldn't outrun vehicles in open terrain. If they tried to move now, they'd be seen. They needed to take them out. Jack turned to Morales. How good are you at setting traps? Morales frowned. What kind of traps? Jack reached into his pack, pulling out a length of detonation cord, one of the last things he had salvaged from the wreckage. He held it up, his expression calm. The kind that make big problems disappear. Morales let out a slow breath. I suddenly feel like I should file a complaint with HR. Jack smirked. Let's get to work. They moved quickly, working in near-total darkness. Jack set the charges along the natural choke point of the path, an area where the terrain narrowed just enough that the vehicles would be forced to slow down. Morales helped dig shallow trenches, covering the wires with loose dirt. It was improvised, but it would work. The sound of engines grew closer. Jack and Morales backed away, finding cover behind an outcrop of rock. Jack held the detonator loosely in his hand, watching the lights creep closer, waiting for the exact moment. The first vehicle hit the trap. Jack pressed the trigger. The ground erupted, fire and debris ripping through the night, flipping the lead truck sideways into the dirt. The second vehicle slammed into the wreckage, skidding wildly, the driver barely able to react in time. The third vehicle stopped immediately, doors flying open, cartel soldiers spilling out, guns raised. Jack didn't give them a chance. He squeezed the trigger of his rifle, dropping the first gunman with a headshot, before they even realized what was happening. Morales, now fully committed to the madness of the night, fired into the chaos, bullets sparking off metal and stone. The survivors scrambled for cover, but Jack was already moving. He flanked right, using the smoke from the explosion to mask his approach. He could hear their panicked shouts, the scramble of boots against gravel. They were disorganized. Good. Jack reached the second vehicle first, yanking open the driver's door and dragging the stunned cartel soldier out, slamming him against the side of the truck before burying his knife deep into his chest. The man shuddered, then collapsed. Jack grabbed his rifle, fully loaded, and turned back toward the wreckage. One cartel soldier broke into a run, trying to escape into the night. Jack raised the rifle, one clean shot, and the man crumpled before he could take 3 steps. Then it was quiet again. Jack exhaled, his pulse finally slowing as he scanned the battlefield. Morales let out a breath, lowering his weapon. I can't believe we just did that. Jack checked his ammo. 2 rounds left. He let out a slow breath. Believe it later. We need to keep moving. Morales nodded, swallowing hard. Lead the way, Ranger. Jack smirked, wiping sweat from his brow. Thought you'd never ask. They left the burning wreckage behind, slipping into the desert shadows once more. The cartel had sent everything they had to kill them tonight, and it still wasn't enough. But Jack knew the truth. This wasn't the last time they'd come, and next time, he'd be ready. The desert wind howled through the canyon, carrying the lingering scent of burnt fuel and blood. Jack kept his rifle tight against his chest, scanning the darkness ahead. The wreckage of the cartel vehicles burned behind them, sending black smoke into the sky. If anyone was watching from across the border, they'd see the fires and know something had gone very wrong for the men who had come hunting tonight. Morales moved beside him, slower now, the exhaustion catching up with him. His breathing was ragged, his uniform stained with dirt and blood, but he was still alive. That was more than they could say for the cartel soldiers who had ambushed them. Jack had lost count of the bodies. He only knew that every single one of them had made a fatal mistake. They thought they could kill him. Jack had spent his life in war zones. He had seen ambushes that turned whole squads into ghosts in the sand, had watched men with decades of training fall to poor intelligence and bad luck. But he hadn't survived Afghanistan, hadn't survived the Black Ops missions no one ever spoke about, just to die in some backroad cartel ambush. They thought this was over. Jack knew better. The cartel never let a humiliation like this stand. There would be more. Bigger guns, bigger men. And this time, they wouldn't send enforcers. They'd send killers. Jack needed to end this before they even had a chance. Keep moving, Jack muttered, adjusting his rifle strap as they made their way through the dry riverbed. The sun was starting to rise, a dull glow on the horizon, but it brought no comfort. The desert always looked peaceful from a distance, but if you stared long enough, you'd see the shadows shifting beneath the surface, waiting to swallow you whole. Morales wiped a hand over his face. Tell me you have an actual plan, because right now, we're just 2 guys walking toward a death sentence. Jack checked the magazine in his rifle, almost empty. He had a spare, but not much more than that. No grenades, no explosives, just his knife, a sidearm, and whatever Morales had left in his clip. Not enough for a war. They needed a war. Jack exhaled, rolling his shoulders, feeling the ache settle deep in his bones. We take the fight to them. End this now. Morales blinked. Jesus, you're serious? Jack didn't answer. They kept moving. The old cartel safe house was 3 miles out, tucked in a hollow behind a dry creek bed, used for smuggling operations before the DEA started cracking down on the area. Jack had been there before, years ago, back when he was still in uniform, working off the books operations with special forces teams no one ever admitted existed. That place wasn't just a hideout. It was a nerve center, and if Jack knew how these men operated, it was where their reinforcements would be gathering. They had time. Not much, but enough. Jack could feel it now, the war inside him that had never truly ended. The man who had walked away from combat, who had tried to find peace in border patrol, in law enforcement, in something other than killing, was gone. The soldier was all that remained. The moment the safe house came into view, Jack slowed his steps. He crouched low behind a ridge of rocks, scanning the perimeter. Morales followed his lead, but Jack could tell the agent was barely holding it together. His hands trembled as he reloaded. His nerves were shot. He was a man who had never been in a real war before tonight. Jack didn't blame him. He just couldn't afford to care. 4 guards outside, Jack murmured, his eyes flicking over the scene. The building was low and wide, constructed from rusted metal panels, a holdover from an old mining outpost. There'll be more inside. Morales swallowed. And you want to just go in there? Jack's grip tightened around his rifle. Number, I want to make sure they don't come out. He adjusted his vest, making sure his knife was strapped tight to his side. The old instinct kicked in, the ghost warfare training that had kept him alive behind enemy lines. This wasn't going to be a prolonged fight. It couldn't be. This had to be surgical. Jack moved first, using the cover of darkness still clinging to the sky. He stayed low, silent, moving between the broken rocks like a shadow. He reached the first guard before the man even knew he was there. A swift knife to the throat, a quiet gurgle, and the man was dead before he hit the ground. Jack didn't stop. He was inside the second guard's space before the body even hit the dirt. He jammed the knife up under the ribs, twisting deep. The guard let out a sharp exhale, eyes wide in shock. Jack pulled the blade free, let the man drop. The third turned, mouth opening to shout. Jack fired one suppressed shot to the skull. The last man realized too late that he was alone. He fumbled for his rifle, panic in his eyes, but Jack closed the distance too fast, smashing the butt of his own weapon against the man's jaw, knocking him sideways. He finished it with a clean stab to the heart. Silence. Jack exhaled slowly, wiping the knife clean on the dead man's shirt. Morales stared at him, mouth slightly open. Jesus! Jack turned toward the safe house. Let's go. They slipped inside, moving fast, controlled. The interior was dimly lit, the air stale. The cartel was in the back room, voices low, tense, probably still talking about the men they had lost tonight. Jack didn't give them time to strategize. He kicked open the door and opened fire. The first two men barely had time to reach for their weapons before bullets tore through them. The third ducked behind a table, firing wildly, but Jack had already moved, using the darkness to his advantage. He slid low, knife in hand, coming up behind the man before he could react. The blade punched into the base of his skull, cutting off his scream. The last one? Jack let Morales handle him. The agent hesitated for half a second before pulling the trigger, putting 3 rounds into the cartel lieutenant's chest. And then it was over. Jack stood over the bodies, his breathing steady, the war inside him finally going quiet. Morales let out a breath. Is it done? Jack scanned the room one last time. No more voices, no more movement. He could feel it. The shift. The end of the battle. Yeah, he said, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. It's done. The cartel would come looking. Maybe not tonight, maybe not tomorrow. But Jack would be waiting. Some wars never end. But this one, Jack had just won.